Welcome back to another episode of War in Cali. In this episode, I'm going to do a far requested and a well-respected individual, Petey Wac from Rollin 60s. The Rollin 60s was fully established in the 70s and became a premier gang in LA. They became one of the deepest hoods and also became known for having money and also a lot of riders. A lot of gangs began to pop up in the 70s all over LA County and LA. Several blood hoods, Crip hoods, and Paru sets. Rollin 60s had early beef with blood sets like the Inglewood family and the LA Brims, but by 1979, they would embark on a war that still lasts to this day. They started warring with the A-Trade Gangstas, who were a close ally. Early A-Trade Gangstas and the Rollin 60s were close friends growing up, but with a new recruit A-Trade Gangsta who was really a 9-0 gangster taking the life of Tyrone, a reputable Rollin 60 who was Big Rick's little brother, it was war from then on. This war created many soldiers on both sides vowing to take each other out. Sets were produced riders in the 80s. The Rollin 60s had a lot of names ringing in the early 80s. They had people like Snoop, Poochie, Little Fee, Key Rock, Jay Stone, Mumbles, Big U, and Peedie Wac himself, just to name a few. A-Trade Gangstas had young dudes like Joker, Trey Stone, Trey Ball, Diamond, Crazy D, 8 Ball, Little Monster, and Mustard Cody, among many more frontlining. Petey Wac was born Rodney Glaze in the mid-60s, around 65. Petey Wac by the late 70s was already invested in his community like many others, and by invested, I mean willing to do it all for his homies in his hood. 1980, there was over 20 shootings between the A-Trades and the Rollin 60s. This left several people on both sides losing their lives. You gotta realize, it was still early in the game. Just a few years prior, having hands and kicking ass was the main defense against the enemies. So with this war started, grabbing straps and trying to catch an enemy became the new norm. Forward towards the 80s, the war intensified. The A-Trades had lost early people like Twinkie, Roach, Tit Tat, Little Frog, and Opie. And the 60s lost people like Baby O, Kid, Kimbone, DC, and Tyrone, just to name a few from both sides. During this time, Petey Wac was becoming a well-known name. He was popular and carried himself like a real G. The 60s was a well-known set, known for going to events like skating rings, concerts, and parties, and known for turning them up, meaning people was going to get shot or they was going to get socked up, and Petey Wac was always in the mix with everything involving the 60s. To the bigger homies, his age range, and younger, he was well respected and known to be on go for his set. Petey Wac's name became so big, he would be on the A-Trade Gangstas and many other rival gangs' top priority list to get rid of if they could catch him, but it wouldn't be that easy with Petey Wac. Mustard Cody even would classify him as an elite shooter. Mustard would even say Petey Wac wanted to take his life, just like he wanted to take his. Mustard Cody would say the police was giving them drops on the Rollin 60s and their locations. They would go shooting at them for days and still could never catch up to Petey Wac. For all the shooting and bodies being dropped on both sides, both gangs lost reputable members to the grave and to the pen. During this time, during the mid-80s, the law started to get stricter, and tons of gang members started getting life sentences. 60s took a big loss with losing a member named Mumbles. Mumbles was a highly respected shooter and hustler. The shooting was blamed on Joker from A-Trade Gangsta, who Mustard Cody mentions in his book countless of times, mentioning him being a shooter and an active member of the A-Trade Gangstas. Mumbles lost his life in 1985 outside of a store on Florence. Joker accounted as him and Mumbles bumped heads inside the store, so Joker said he went outside the store to go to his car and get a strap. He walked back inside the store and shot Mumbles 5 times, taking his life. Just 4 days later, in response, the 60s got the drop and tried to catch Joker, but things went left. Joker and his family lived on West 51st Street. Joker grew up in a 2-parent home, and actually his dad was a preacher. But Joker was the opposite of that. He wasn't no preacher's son. He was with the business. The 60s put up to Joker's home and busted inside his house. Only people were there were his mom and his little brother. Even though Joker wasn't there, the Rollin 60s took the life of his mother and his little brother. Months later, 2 people were picked up for the shooting of Joker's family. It was a man named Eric, and it was Petey Wac. While in jail, multiple other charges would come up on Petey Wac, and that included other shootings on the A-Trade Gangstas. Even if he didn't do it, police tried to pin a lot of shooting on him because he was a known gang member. Eric and Petey Wac decided to separate their cases, with Petey Wac facing other shooting charges and an attempted on Little Hard from A-Trade Gangsta. Eric was railroaded in his case. He received life. He is currently pleading his innocence and trying to get out. He's been in prison since 1987 and is currently married at the moment. Petey Wac took a plea charge on that case. Petey Wac trial ended in a hung jury, but he took a plea stating he knew how messed up the system was and he didn't want to get done how Eric was. He received 15 years for this crime. Joker from A-Trade Gangsta was sentenced to life for taking the life of Mumbles. In prison, He started going by the name Tommy Shakur and became a model prisoner and changed his life around. He currently is doing a podcast at the moment about his trials and tribulations and what he's doing in life. It is said that Joker will be paroling soon. Petey Wac ended up being released in the early 2000s. He could be seen as CJ Mack, rapper from Rollin 60 documentary called Seawall, It's a Way of Living. Petey Wac talks about all his time he did in prison and how he was making a change in his life and how prison changed him. Petey Wac even talked about how he was doing programs to keep young dudes off the streets and giving them his experience. Petey Wac would end up going back to prison shortly after on a strap charge. With Petey Wac being a 2-striker, this was his 3rd strike, and he got life over a strap. Petey Wac has been in prison since 2005. Petey Wac had a parole hearing in 2021, but was denied parole. His next parole hearing is 2026. Petey Wac is now around 57 years old and is now married. He's in prison, but he's staying positive and hoping he will be released soon. Petey Wac is one of the most infamous Rollin 60s, and this was his story. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my previous videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.